Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Rochelle from Rochelle Handmade Designs, and in this video we are doing the sew along for the sew call. If you watched my video Wednesday, you will know that I talked about how these pants, Simplicity 9227, it's not a relaxed fit, but this is the sew along for Simplicity 9227. So before we get started, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe button, and also turn on the notification bell so you're notified every time I upload a new video. So let's go ahead and get right on into this sew along. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the next sew along as part of the business wardrobe series. This is still the first part in that business wardrobe series out of a 4-part series. This is the second video in this series, but this video is for the Simplicity 9227, which is view B. The pants, I did do the jacket already, so you can look up and see that tutorial for the jacket, but in this video we are doing the pants. So let's go ahead and talk about the pattern instructions and the pattern pieces you need in order to construct this pattern. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the inside pattern instructions itself. So first of all, we are doing view B on the pattern. The pattern pieces you will need is 10, 11, 12, and 13. 10 your front, 11 your back, 12 your pocket, and 13 your casing, which is only 4 pattern pieces that you will need, which will also be great for the hashtag sewing 5 and below, just to let you know, right? View B right here shows the layout. So basically you're just going to cut out, according to your layout, whatever size that you are cutting for your pants. So let's go ahead and take a look at the glossary and the sewing instructions and directions. So for this, you need to know how to do your stay stitching. Your stay stitches is done at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Also, it tells you to reinforce and clip. So you're going to reinforce, basically create a 1 inch stitching and then clip into that stitching. You also need to be aware of interfacing, the pattern pieces that you will be interfacing. If you need to do any interfacing, which for these pants you should not need to do any interfacing, but you will need to do some understitching for your pocket. So moving on to view B for the pants. The steps that we will take, it's only 15 instructions to do these pants. So the first thing we're going to do is apply our pocket to both front and back. After we do that, only the front pattern piece, which is pattern piece number 10, we will press our seams towards the pocket and then understitch the pocket. After we do that, we will attach one front to one back, right sides together, and sew our side seam and around the pocket, and then attach both fronts to both backs, which would probably be number 4. Slip those together and also stitch the inseam of the legs, which is right here in number 5. Stitch the inseam and then attach it and sew up the center crotch seams. Now, if you do not know how to figure out your crop depth, what I'm going to tell you to do is sit in a chair, get a measuring tape, and go from your belly button to the chair, right? Wherever you like to wear your pants at, sit down in a chair, go from where you start wearing your pants at all the way down to the chair, and that is your crotch depth, okay? So that's how you measure it on the pattern, if it's going to be correct or not. Now in step number 8, we're going to do the casing for our waistband. Now in the instructions, it tells you to use a 1 inch wide elastic. I want to create 2 rows of elastic to pop onto my waist, so I will be using a 1/2 inch seam, not a 1/2 inch seam allowance, a 1/2 inch wide elastic instead of a full inch. All right, and then we're gonna go ahead and stitch our elastics together. Make sure you close up that hole on step number 14 and then sew up our hem, and then we are all done with our pants. All right, so now that I've walked you through the steps that we will take in order to sew these pants, let's go ahead and get right on into the tools and the supplies that we will need in order to construct these pants. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the tools and supplies you will need in order to construct this, these pants. So of course you will need your basic sewing supplies. Of course, you know, I put everything on a tray so you can see. So I have pencils. Now I have a pencil just in case I need to size up the pattern, which I should not have to do that. I might have to size it up at the hips, but we will see once I get to the pattern. I also have a white soluble marking pen. Because I'm using dark fabric, I need to use this instead of my disappearing disappearing ink marker, but this is just basically your marking tool. So you need marking tools in order to mark your dots for your pocket. Also, I have scissors, you know, one for paper, one for fabric. I never mix the two there. I have my thread clippers at the sewing machine, a point turner just in case you may need it for your casing. Also, I cut with rotary cutters, one for paper, one for fabric. I never mix the two there as well. And the only other thing that you will need is pins to pin your fabric together. And you will need, the only notion that you will need is elastic, 1-inch knit elastic. Now, on the pattern, it tells you that you will need some knit elastic. And on the pattern, I'm grabbing the pattern for you. It says that you will need 1 3/8 yard of 1-inch wide elastic. So you will have a casing. So basically you're gonna have to take your waist measurement, add an inch, and then cut that size for your knit elastic, all right? Now that's all the tools. And of course you will need your pattern. That's all the tools and supplies that you will need in order to construct these pants. So let's go ahead and talk about the pattern pieces used in order to construct these pants. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the pattern pieces you will need in order to construct these pants. It's only 4 pattern pieces. So the first pattern piece is pattern piece number 10. Your front, you need to cut 2 of fabric. Now I did make a slight modification by extending my hips because it shows that a hip measurement for a size 16 is a 43. So I just basically sized it up 3 inches in order to fit a 46-inch waist. What I did was take 3 divided by 4 and just enlarged it by 3/4 of an inch, and then just made sure that I have a curve come around the hips. That's all I did. That's the only modification that I did for these pants. You could do that slight modification as well if you need to. It's just I did not want to purchase 2 separate patterns, all right? But this is the front. You need to cut 2 of fabric. Pattern piece number 11, which is your back, you need to cut 2 of fabric as well. Pattern piece number 12, which is your pocket, you need to cut 4 of fabric. And the last pattern piece you need is pattern piece number 13, which is your casing for your waist, and you need to cut 2 of fabric. Now, please take a note that all pattern pieces will be with the pattern side up, and you will cut around. You do not need to place any pattern pieces right side of the pattern down. Now that's all the pieces that you will need to cut in order to construct these pants. So let's go ahead and get right on into the sewing. All right, so let's go ahead and get into this tutorial. So the first thing you want to do is grab pattern piece number 10, which is your front. You should have cut 2. And the first thing what we're going to do is attach the pockets with right sides together, and then we're going to understitch them, okay? Now I wrote on the wrong side of my pattern piece to let you know that this pattern piece number 10, the front on both sides, and then you don't have to do what I do, but right on the back of your pattern piece number 11 and B for the back, it would make more sense once you attach the front to the back, all right? So I'm just gonna put one of them out of the way, but you're gonna do this for both of your fronts. So what I'm gonna do is take pattern piece number 12, my pockets, you should have cut 4 of these total. And what you're gonna do is with right side, I also marked the wrong side. So just make sure with right sides together, you want to match up that notch and match up the 2 dots that you have, and you're going to pin. So go ahead and pin now. All right, so now that I have my pockets pinned to my front pattern piece, using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and then you want to serge from the top to about 1 inch below your pocket. Once you do that, back, press your seam towards the pocket, and then understitch. Understitch is done at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, so make sure you understitch only on your front pockets. Do not understitch on your back pockets, but make sure you attach your pockets to the back pattern piece as well, which is pattern piece number 11. Go ahead and do all of that now. All right, so now that I have my front pockets attached, my pockets attached to my front, and I also have my pockets attached to my back. So this is my back where you see pattern piece number 11 with the B, that's my back. And then you have pattern piece number 10 where I marked the F, which is my front. So now what you're going to do, I'm not following with the instructions, I'm just doing this, but I think you're on number probably 4, I believe. So the next thing you're gonna do is with right sides together, you're going to pin front to back at side seam and inseam. Now I'm gonna turn mine this way so you could see it. Now this is my front right here on top of my back. Now I'm gonna pin the inseam and the side seam because you guys know I like to cut down how many times I'm going to the sewing machine. So I'm going to do this all at once. So make sure for the inseam you pin at this notch right here, pin at the top, and then you want to pin at the very bottom as well. So pin at the bottom. After you pin at the bottom, you want to pin the length of the inseam. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that you have your inseam pin, you're going to go ahead and pin your side seam as well. So I'm just going to turn my pants around and I'm going to pin my side seam. So just bring it over a little bit and pin the side seam. Now I'm going to match up my pockets. Make sure you match up your pockets at the top. And make sure that your seams is pressed towards your pocket, okay? So you have little notches, not notch, but dots right here. Pin at your dots, and that means that you're gonna start at the beginning and stop at that dot. Leave in between the dots unsewn, and then you're gonna start at that dot and then sew down. So that's basically what that means. So make sure you pin, and I'm gonna pin right here at this other dot. I'm gonna pin around my pockets. So match up your pocket seams and pin around your pockets. Now you want to pin the length of your side seam. So go ahead and match it up and pin your side seams now. All right, so now that I have my side seam pin and my inseam pin, I'm going to sew the side seam first, and using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm gonna start at the top, back stitch at the beginning, stop at this dot, back stitch and cut my thread. I'm gonna start at this dot right here by the pocket, back stitch at this dot right here, which is the X on mine, of course, because I'm using dark fabric. I'm gonna back stitch and sew all the way down to the hem and back stitch at the end. Once I do that, I'm going to go ahead and sew around my pocket, also using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. After I do that, I'm going to sew my inseam using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and at the end. Once I sew my side seam, my inseam, and my pockets, I'm gonna make sure I finish it off with my serger. So make sure you clip into the back pattern piece right here on the side. You're gonna clip about 1 inch from your pocket, clip the back seam only, not both, just the back, which is pattern piece number 11. So clip only a little bit of the back. Do not clip through your stitching after you sew it, and then finish off your pocket, your side seam, and your inseam. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so I have my pockets sewn together and finished off. I have my side seam sewn and finished off. I have my inseam sewn and finished off. So now what you want to do is grab both of your pants piece, and what you're gonna do is have one with wrong sides out, right? And then you want to turn one with the right side out, okay? Which means that your the wrong side is on the inside. What you're going to do is slip the pant that is right side out into the one that's wrong side out, like so. So this one where you see the 10F, meaning the front, what you want to do is take the one with right side out. You see that you do not see the inside of mine. You want to slip it inside the one with the wrong side out. Okay, make sure that your fronts are lining up and your backs are lining up. So just slip it in there and give it a nice shake to where everything lines up perfectly. And you should have something that looks like this. Now make sure that everything lines up perfectly and make sure that your pattern, your pocket is attached to your front. So since this one is not, I'm going to make sure to pin, and I'm going to base that pocket seam to the front pattern piece. So go ahead and base that now, but I'm going to base mine the same time I'm going to be sewing my crotch seam. So I'm just going to go ahead and pin that pocket to the front. Make sure you are pinning it to pattern piece number 10. Like you see the front right here, 10F. So I'm making sure that the pocket is to the front and not to the back. So I'm going to pin that right here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm matching up the crotch seam. So make sure that, first of all, you want to make sure that the seam allowance, the seams, are facing towards the back of the pants, which is pattern piece number 11. So you want to make sure that your seams is facing towards the back on both the pants. The pant that is wrong side out and right side out, make sure that the seams are facing the back. And then what you're going to do is pin. So I'm going to pin right here. And then I'm going to pin, you should have 2 notches, which represents the back. So I'm going to pin right here at these double notches. And then I'm going to pin along the crotch curve. So go ahead and pin along the crotch curve, the back crotch curve. And now when you have the other side, you will be pinning the front crotch curve as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and move it to the other side. And you should have 1 notch. And you have double notches in the front, triple notches in the back. So just make sure you pin at that notch. And then you want to pin along the front crotch curve. So make sure you pin along that crotch curve. Now what you're going to do is go to the sewing machine. Now that I have a pin, go to the sewing machine, starting at one side, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning, and sew around that crotch curve and back stitch at the end. Once you sew it, make sure you finish off your seam. So go ahead and sew that now. All right, so now that I have the crotch seam done, what you want to do is go ahead and, one other thing I did was go ahead and base the top portion at about 3/8 of an inch to make sure that the pocket stays towards the front of my pants instead of to the back. So now what you want to do is go ahead and pull your pants with right side out. And this is what your pants should look like so far. Now this is the front of my pants with right side out. And you'll notice that I have a clean finish of my pockets on both sides as well. Now what you want to do is go ahead and move your pant over to the side and grab pattern piece number 13, which is your casing. All right, so this is pattern piece number 13, your casing. You should have cut 2 of fabric. Make sure you transfer all your dots and notches. So you should have 2 dots right here. So when you open it up, I have 2 dots there and 2 dots right there. So now what you want to do is, with right sides together, you want to pin from dot. You want to pin at the first dot. Now you won't see dots on this side of my fabric, but I can see it on the inside of my fabric. So I'm just going to transfer it to the wrong side of my fabric as well. So I'm just going to put my pattern piece back over it and transfer those dots now. And then I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to turn my pattern piece over, and I'm going to transfer it here as well. So now what I'm gonna do is with right sides together, I'm going to pin at the notch, pin at the top, and pin at the bottom. Okay. Now on the other side, I'm going to pin the top dot. I'm going to pin there. And then I'm going to pin the second dot right here, pin there, pin at the notch, and pin at the bottom. All right, so now what you're going to do is on the side where you do not have a dot, right? You're going to sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and back stitch at the end. You're going to sew the entire seam, okay? The entire seam right here, you're going to sew from the top to the bottom using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch. Now on this side where you have the dots, you're going to start at the top, back stitch at the beginning, stop at the dot, back stitch at this first dot, cut your thread. Start at the second dot, back stitch at the second dot, and sew all the way down to the end and back stitch at the end. You should have a little opening between the two dots. Make sure you press your seams open. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that we have our casing stitched on both sides and we press the seams open, you see that you have a little hole right here. Don't worry about that. That's where you're going to insert your elastic, okay? So now you have it look like this. So now what you're going to do is with wrong sides together, you're going to press all the way around. So go ahead and do that. And after you press, go ahead and base along the top where the raw edges are. Base at about I'm gonna base mine at about 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so I have my casing pressed with wrong sides together. I pressed it all the way around. And then I base using a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance instead of the 3/8 that I originally wanted to use. If you use 3/8, it's perfectly fine. It's not gonna make a difference at all because you're not going to be able to see it once you attach it. Now, one thing I want to make note of is that area where you have the opening to insert your elastic, that is going to be on the outside. So make sure that you have it to where when you attach it to your pants, you have this on the outside. So now we're going to go ahead and attach our casing to the pants. So go ahead and grab your pants. And I'm going to have the front part of my pants up on the table facing me, okay? Now what you're going to do is take your casing and put it over your pants. The part where you have that opening, you want on one side seam, okay? And it'll make sense here shortly. So make sure you have it to where your casing is, your pants is in between your casing, okay? So now what you're going to do is you have notches on your pants and you have notches on your casing. So you want to make sure you match up the notches. So I have a notch here and I'm going to match up the notch right here on my pants. So pin right there at that notch and pin at the other notch as well in the front. And then I'm going to pin both of my side seams. So that portion where you have the opening for the elastic, you want to pin at your side seam. Now you can go ahead and pin along the front in between where you already have your pins. I'm going to go ahead and do that. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so now what you want to do is go ahead and flip your pants to the back side. And you pretty much want to do the same thing that you did for your front side. You want to match up those notches in the back, pin this seam to the side seam, and then pin in between all the rest of your back. If you need more pins, go ahead and do so now. All right, so now that I have my casing pinned to my pants all the way around, what I'm gonna do is start in the center back. Using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and a regular length stitch, I'm going to back stitch at the beginning, so all the way around, and then back stitch at the end using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so now what I did was I went ahead and attached my casing onto my pants with right sides together. All right, so now here's another thing that I'm gonna do. I did it using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, but what I did not mention is you need to create another roll of stitching at about 1/4 of an inch away, yes, 1/4 of an inch away from your 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So what that means is you need to create another stitch that's about 7/8 of an inch seam allowance, okay? So basically, when you go back to the sewing machine, from this line, you need to have this line at the 1/4 of an inch and create another row of stitching all the way around. Now, what I'm gonna do, go back to the sewing machine and do that, but I'm going to trim the raw edges, and I'm going to serge my raw edges as well, okay? After I do that, in the back of my pants, this is the back that you're looking at right now, I'm going to insert my label. I'm gonna go ahead and, so if you're using the label, go ahead and insert it in the back of your casing now before you attach your elastic. Go ahead and do all of that now, and I will come back and show you what it looks like, and then we'll insert the elastics. So go ahead and do that now. All right, so I have my casing finished off. I finished off the casing, and I went ahead and sewn the bottom portion of my label down. Now, I did not sew the top of it, which all I'm gonna do is fold in about 1/4 of an inch and attach it like this in order to finish up my label, but I don't wanna do that just yet. Why? Because I have to insert my elastic. Once I insert my elastic, then I will sew the top portion. If I sew it now, it'll be difficult for me to get my elastic underneath the label. So that's why I only sewed the bottom portion of the label. If you sewed the top portion, go ahead and unpick that for now, simply because you will have a difficult time trying to get the elastic through. So I do apologize, I didn't mention that when I said go ahead and install your label, but just make sure that you install your label half of your label is in between the back seam, okay? All right, so now what you want to do is cut a piece of elastic your waist measurement plus 1 inch, okay? And once you do that, you have that opening that's on the inside now, right here, where you left that opening right here. What you're going to do is put a safety pin at one end of your elastic, and what you're going to do is just basically feed it all the way through. So go ahead and feed your elastic all the way through. Make sure that your elastic does not get bunched up all the way around, okay? So go ahead and feed your elastic all the way through now. All right, so now that I have my elastic sift all the way through, I'm going to make sure that I pull in every direction to make sure that it's evenly distributed all the way around. Now, before I attach my elastic at the end by crossing them over, I want to basically just pin the elastic to the other elastic, hold it together, and then try them on. You try them on for 2 things. The first thing is you want to make sure that it fits in the waist. And if you want to do a double row stitching, all you have to do is stitch on the top side of the elastic at about a 1/2 inch seam allowance to create double row, okay? And then the other thing that you're checking for is the length, because the only thing that's left for you to do is hem your pants. So once you try your pants on, see if you have a good fit in the waist. All you have to do is attach your elastic. So you're just going to put it over, zigzag a couple of times, back and forth, cut the excess elastic, and then close up this hole by just hand sewing, basically closing it up with a hand needle. After you do that, all you have to do is your hem. Now, I believe the hem is 1 1/4 inch, but it's completely up to you. I'm gonna do probably 1 inch on my hem. So what I'm gonna do is create a basting stitch 1 inch all the way around, press up 1/4 of an inch, and then press up again that 1 inch. So that's what I'm gonna do on mine. Make sure you get a good fit, And that's all that I have for this tutorial for you today. I hope you like it. So there you have it. That is the complete sew along. If you decide to sew these pants, make sure you tag myself, and you can also use the hashtag sewing 5 and below. So go ahead and tag me and Talisha from Creativity by T so we can see your creation of these pants. And also, like I said, it's only 4 pattern pieces. So yes, you can use this as the hashtag sewing 5 and below. If you have not heard about sewing 5 and below, you can also check the video out. I'll go ahead and link above and also in the end screen so you can see what it's all about. All right, so that's all I have in this video. That is the complete sew along. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you are notified every time I upload a new video. So I'll catch you in the next video. And as always, keep sewing.